Hey everybody, welcome to our video on Excel to pull data from an Access database. We're going to put VBA in an Excel spreadsheet to query an Access database. Then we're going to use the copy from record set method to write that data to the spreadsheet. Now to be clear, we're going to be using an Access database as our source of data and making a copy of that data in the Excel spreadsheet. So the flow of data is from Access to Excel, not from Excel back to Access. Now the code we're going to use today is going to look very similar to some code that we saw in a prior video of mine where we did almost the same thing except we drove the process from the Access side. So today we're keeping the same direction of data flow, but we're reversing, if you will, positions. We're doing a pull from Excel instead of a push from Access. Let's have a quick look then at the steps we're going to follow to do this. Now we're making a static spreadsheet, if you will, in terms of format, because the spreadsheet is going to refresh itself when we press our refresh button. So we can do some formatting in the spreadsheet and allow them to be saved. So we're going to create some column headings manually and format some columns as well. We do all that manually. We're going to need to make sure that we can see the developer tab. That's going to allow us to get to the VBA window. We're going to add a button for our refresh functionality. We'll assign VBA to execute when we press that button. We're also going to need to make a reference to the Microsoft Office Access Database Engine object library. That'll give us access to the DAO database objects and the DAO record set objects we'll need. And we'll write our code and then we'll test it. So that's pretty quick. It takes about like, what, 2 or 3 minutes maybe? So let's open up a copy of Excel. Alright, so the first thing we wanted to do is make some column headings. I'm going to start down here in C4, let's say. Next, let's make sure, oh wait, so next we want to format these 2 columns. These are money columns. So I'm going to format cells, go to number, or excuse me, go to currency, and click OK. Next we want to make sure that our developer tab, we're going to go to our developer tab. Now if your developer tab is not visible, you're going to need to go to, depending upon your version you're in. If you're in Office 2007, you're going to have the round office window button up here. Go there. If you're in 2010 or 13, go to your File tab and then go to Options, Customize Ribbon, and then check the checkbox next to Developer right over here. Alright, and then click OK. Okay, so we go to our Developer tab. And what this does is it gives us access to our Visual Basic window and also to the insert command, which allows us to put forms on our spreadsheet. And we want to press the top left hand button here, which is, if I hover over it without moving, too late, that's the button. I'm going to put it right up here in the corner. Right? And right here it wants us to assign code to run. Now instead of doing a macro, I want to use VBA, so I'm going to press the new button, and that's going to get us over here to our VBA window. We'll come back over here in just a minute. Let's finish with our button first. We've got the resize handle still visible here. Now if you click off of it and click back on it, just right click it and that'll get you the resize button, or resize handles visible again. I'm just make it a little bit bigger, and I want to put some better words on there. Let's say refresh data. Alright. Get your resize button handles again. Just pull just a little bit away from the border there. All right. So doing this over here in the A and the B column, you can, if you need to print the spreadsheet, you can use your print range to prevent printing these blank columns over. So let's head over to our VBA window. So we have a method here that's going to execute when we press our refresh data button. I'm going to make another method under here for a sub called refresh data, and we'll execute it this way. We'll say call. Alright, so let me copy in some boilerplate stuff here. I want to do, since we're going to be running a query, we always want to have at least some basic error handling to give the customers a little bit better error message than what Access is going to pop up for them. And so what I've got down here is on error, go to sub error here. We're going to clear out any text in our status bar and then give a message box that shows the error number and the description. and then all this stuff up here we're going to talk about in a few minutes as we get to it. Alright, so we got some blank space in here to work with. The first thing we want to do is make sure that we can work with our database objects. Okay, we're going to use a DAO database and a DAO record set, and by default Excel will not have those referenced. So go to your Tools menu and click References. We want to scroll down and find the Microsoft Office Access Database Engine objects. Alright, now when you're in Excel, don't use the DAO reference. Use the Microsoft Office Access Database Engine reference. Now your number might differ on your machine depending upon what version you've got. On mine it's 14 right now. And click OK. Now I want to copy in some variables we're going to use today. Our first one here is a constant, dbloc. It's in db location. It's going to hold a string, which is the full path to the database we're going to open. And in a production database, you might have a different way of doing this or a better way of doing this, but for the purpose of what we're doing right here, we're just going to hard code this to make it easy and clear. Next, we're going to need to have a reference to this database in order to open it and interact with it. So we're going to use a DAO database object, and that'll be called DB. RS is going to be our record set object. We're going to need a reference to our workbook. We'll call that Excel book. We'll need a reference to the sheet we're working with. That'll be Excel sheet. I've made a long here, a big number, to keep track of our record count, which we'll use for formulas. I want to put some sums at the bottom of our two money columns, and in order to do that I need to know what row to put that formula in, and our record count is going to help us get to the right row. And I've got a string here called SQL to hold our query string. So the first thing we want to do is grab references to the spreadsheet we're working with. All right. First we want to set Excel book, which is our workbook, equal to the active workbook that we've already got opened. Next, we want to get a reference to the first spreadsheet. We've done all this in our first worksheet. So we're going to set Excel sheet equal to Excel book here. Worksheets, that's a collection, and the first worksheet in the collection. All right. Next, we want to clear out any data that might be in the spreadsheet from a previous usage of the spreadsheet, and we're going to we're going to clear out an entire range. And again, there's probably a better way to do this in a productionized database, but for here I just want to clear out a big chunk, a big area of cells, A5 through H1500, just to make sure we have plenty of clear space to work with. Next, we want to tell our customers, our user, that we're about to do something. Alright, so we're going to use a status bar to communicate with them and tell them that we're connecting to an external database, and we want to do this because we don't know if your network's going to be slow that day. We might not know how much data we're going to pull back. It might take a few minutes, or more than a few seconds maybe, and we want to give them some indication that the spreadsheet is doing something and working. So we're going to set the cursor equal to the hourglass as well. Next, we want to get a reference to the database that we want to open. We're going to use our DB object, a DAO database object that we set called DB. Use the open database method, and it takes a string that holds the full path to the database. So dbloc is our constant, which holds our full path to our database. So this gets our hooks in the database itself. Now we can interact with that database. First thing I want to do though is I'm going to use a query to populate a record set. So I'm going to set our SQL string, copy paste there, equal to a query. Okay, so now we want to actually execute our query and put the results in our record set. So we're going to use our record set object, and we're going to set it equal to our database object, DB, the open record set method. We're going to give it the SQL string we just built and tell it to use a snapshot of that data. Now, before we go any further, I want to copy in two more versions of this statement just to show the various options you have here for the open record set method. You can also give the open record set method a string which holds the name of the query that exists in the database you're opening. You can also give it in a string the name of an entire table. Both of those work just fine. It depends on what you need to do. So now I want to start actually working with the data we've retrieved. Now I said that we wanted to put a formula at the bottom of our spreadsheet to sum all the columns above. In order to do that, I need to know what row to write that formula on, which means I need to know how many rows of data I pulled back in a record set. I'm going to copy in some code here. First, we're going to use the status bar object again to communicate with the customer. We've finished running our query, and now we're writing data to our spreadsheet. In order to know how many rows I got back, I need to interrogate the record count property of our record set. Remember, a DAO record set, though, when you first open it, well, the record pointer is pointing to the first record. So if you interrogate record count property, if there's any data in there at all, it'll always tell you 1. If there's no data, it'll tell you 0. So the first thing I want to do is see if we have any data. And if we don't, tell the users in a message box, we got no data, and then just go ahead and get out. If we do have data, though, in order to find out how many rows are in there, we need to move to the last record in the record set. Then we can interrogate the record count property and put it in the record count variable that we created earlier. And then let's move back to the first record in a record set. Now that we know that, I'm going to write this data to the spreadsheet using the copy from record set method. We're going to use the Excel sheet reference, we use the range property, and we want it to start in the upper left hand corner in C5, which is right here. So this copy of record set method is going to write however many columns we pulled in to the record set going to the right, and then of course how many rows going down. So the last thing I want to do is just a tiny bit of formatting. I want to put a double line underneath our data, and then I want to put our 2 formulas, and then we are finished. So here we're going to use our line, or create a line. We use the range again, starting in C. And what we want to do here is wherever our data ended up, we want to put a double line at the bottom of that row of data. So we're going to start at C, the column C, and look at our record count number plus 4. And the reason we're going to do plus 4 is I've got 4 rows above where our data started here. Okay, our data starting on column 5. So our record count plus 4 should give us the right line. And we're going to go across to F. So that's our range, okay, C to F, and our record count property. Borders, Excel edge bottom, line style equal to Excel double. That'll give us that double line. Next, I want to copy in our 2 formulas, our 2 sums. Again, using the range, this is going to be the E column, which is gross sales. And again, for positioning where the formula is going to go, we've got 4 blank lines above our data. Then we have however many data rows we have, and I want this formula to go on the row below our last line of data. So record count plus 5 in our case. Use the formula property, and formula property takes a string. Okay, so enclose it in double quotes, give it an equal sign, sum, and then we're going to sum the E column. So our first row of data was in E5. Our last row of data was in E record count property, or record count variable rather, plus 4. And I'll copy in the same thing for column F. Alright, same formula except it's all for F. We'll notify our users that we're done by saying update complete. And then if everything goes well, we will fall down into our sub exit area here. We can set our cursor back to Excel default, close our record set, and then set all of our objects equal to nothing, all right, to release those resources. Now let's head over to our spreadsheet and click on our button and see what happens. And there we go. Our query executes, copy of record set method puts the data into here. We get a double line underneath our data, and then here are our two formulas. You can see the sum as is resolved, E5 to E12 and F5 to F12. And again, the formatting we created manually is still here. We formatted these columns as currency. That's still here. You can save this spreadsheet, and all this will remain. And all you have to do is reopen it and click the refresh button. And there you go. So that's it for this approach to pulling data from Access into Excel. I hope you got something out of this. As usual, I'll put a link to the code in the description of the video down below, and I'll also put a link to one of my other videos where we use very similar code to do this process from the Access side. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.